All right. What's up, everybody? We are live here at the Angle of Pursuit podcast, presented by FakePigskin.com. Brian Twining, we got a special guest in the house tonight. You've seen his work over at Rotoworld. It's John Daigle. What's up, John?
What is up, boys? How are y'all doing?
Doing okay. You know,
as well as good as we can be.
Yeah.
Right. Do y'all have partners, kids, someone else at home to hang out with?
Yeah, I have me and my wife are here.
Okay.
And my dog. So
okay,
just doing our thing. What about you?
No, that's why I always ask, because I'm curious, like, what level everyone's at. Because right now I'm just like, no girlfriend, no kids, no dog. So it's pretty much like me, the office, and I do make runs to like the coast is around here in Connecticut. So like I'll go a couple miles out and like see the beach. But even like 3 months in, that you can only do so much when you're on your own. So
right.
You kind of just up the cocktail making, find a few different things to watch. What's funny though is that before I jumped on, I was like, I got in on time. I was a little late though, and it's because I just got done washing clothes, and this has never happened to me. And maybe it's happened to you before, but I guess the static picked up, and I went to touch my computer because you sent me a link to jump in. But when I jumped in, everything shut down. Like the lights, the computer, the monitors, everything literally shut down. So I hope we're just running okay right now, because I kind of had to reset everything quickly, and everyone knows I am not the best with technology.
Well, it sounds like you may have like a paranormal activity thing going on. So if we see anything weird in the background, we'll definitely let you know. But like everything's working smoothly, so we'll roll with this. But yeah, that's quite the experience.
It was unique, and again, I can't explain it at all. So fingers crossed we make it out alive.
Absolutely. We'll just give it a few more minutes while people start to roll in. So So John, I mean, obviously quarantine's been a unique situation. Sometimes it's kind of nice though to be able to have your own time, your own space to just do whatever. Because Brian and I can both attest that, well, it's great to have a significant other here. Sometimes being around them that much, you get on each other's nerves just a little bit.
Yeah, I was about to say, if we're trying to rank each other, like who's doing worse, the person that meditates and drinks a lot, or the person who has kids running around 24/7? So yeah, you just take everything with a grain of salt.
For sure. All right, Brian, let's jump in. Welcome everybody to the Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football home over at FakePigskin.com. I am your host, Kyle Robert. Follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. Brian, we're going to talk some best ball tonight, and it's I think a good timing. It's kind of like that gap between like dynasty rookie drafts have kind of come to an end. A lot of dynasty startups have come to an end, and there's still time before we dive into redraft fully. So best ball kind of owns this window, and obviously with a lot of people hanging out in quarantine, got a little more time to throw a few more drafts in. And John's got a ton of content over at Rotoworld that I want everyone to make sure they go check out, especially if you're newer to best ball. He's got some tiers, which I love, tiered rankings. It really gives me an idea. Okay, if I'm diving in, I want a receiver. There's one guy left in this tier, and they're running backs that I'm happy with. There's 3, 4, 5 names. I know kind of how to navigate as I'm heading through my draft. So, John, I guess talk to us in general about kind of your thoughts on best ball and where your head is at as we head into an interesting time in the off season about how you're drafting kind of in quarantine.
Yeah, this is the time of the season or the off season where everyone kind of jumps in and starts getting involved in best ball. And I've done it for years now just to keep up with ADP, like for my job, like over the off season, it makes it easy. Plus I always prefer to have skin in the game as opposed to just letting hot takes fly, because you can trust that whatever I tell you or whatever advice I give you, sure, it could very well be wrong, but just know like my money's behind it. So if you're not getting that extra bottle of wine or getting kicked out of your apartment because you can't pay rent, it's because I also am getting kicked out of my apartment because I can't pay rent. So I assure you, whatever I say, it's because I have skin in the game. And right now, the basic general is that last year was easier because we did have the draft app, right? Jeremy Levine and some friends of mine built that amazing app that we did for a year. Everyone talked about it last year. And I do have a feeling we're going to get something else. But right now, basically where I'm at is mid to high stakes and FFPC leagues, which are 28 round best ball if you want to focus on defense and kickers in your leagues, or they have slim leagues, which are 20 rounds or 18 rounds. I think it's 20 rounds, where you don't have to worry about defense and kicker whatsoever. And that's also tight end premium scoring. So that's why you see Kelsey always go in the first round and Kittle follow him up in the second, is because it's 1.5 PPR for tight ends. But it's FFPC.com or myffpc.com, as well as drafters.com I've been playing on as well. Bestball10s.com with an app is still happening. And then I believe something called Underdog Fantasy is coming soon for everyone to try out. So those are all the sites we can play throughout the offseason, despite not having draft and general focus. I do truly believe, like, we'll probably get into tournament strategies as we move along here, but general focus, if you just want to play best ball and you jump into your normal 10 or 12 man league, I really think you can hit 55, 60% win rate, and therefore a high ROI by going by a general set of rules. And that is 2 or 3 quarterbacks, 2 or 3 tight ends. Pay attention to the bye weeks. Don't overlap them, because remember, these bye weeks matter. You can't have 2 quarterbacks, but also have them on the same bye week and not have points for those positions. And then 6 or 7 running backs and wide receivers.
Yeah, and for those of you that are new to best ball or are not really sure exactly what it is, it allows you to draft a full roster. So you're drafting 2 quarterbacks instead of 1. You're drafting a couple tight ends instead of 1. And it plays your optimal lineup every week. And basically you accumulate points. So it's really fun. And I think, John, a great tool for getting ready for those redraft leagues, because like you said, money behind it. There's a chance to, you're actually not having somebody jump in to a mock draft and take a kicker in round 1 and then leaving the mock draft and, completely screwing up kind of a lot of your draft prep. So you can kind of think about, okay, well, what would I do here? Do I like, going receiver heavy early, going running back heavy early, and seeing how your rosters turn out and kind of having a good idea in your head of where your roster, what you like as you head into redraft leagues and whatnot.
It just takes the headaches out of it. Imagine yourself on Sunday morning, as we are in season every single week, pretty much, and making right or wrong decisions. But either way, losing hair, obviously, over all of those decisions. That's taken out for us, though. And for best ball, you try to factor in volatility because it matters. Like, you want spiked ceilings, kind of like in DFS, right? You're not really. It'd be nice to be a consistent player, and in cash games, you can definitely do that. But in tournaments, what are you trying to do? Win 3 or 4 tournaments? Like, you're trying to have a roller coaster of a linear graph because you want those big payoffs, and then you can coast through small losses, but keep on spiking big wins. And that's kind of what your best ball, especially late round players, add. If you can get 1 or 2 X position 1, so like wide receiver 1, which is top 12 position, as we know, or a top 12 running back from a late round guy, that's terrific, because you got a winning week essentially, despite drafting him in the 15th to 20th round. Yeah.
And you can take more shots on guys that you may not like in redraft, knowing that those spike weeks could be coming. You could have a guy that you may only get 3 or 4 spike weeks from, and starting him in any sort of regular redraft league, it could be a lot of, a big headache, and you don't know which week to start him. But this week it takes all that out. And Brian, when we have that itch to draft, when we have that itch to get involved, but don't want to commit to 37 season long leagues, it fills a nice gap.
Yeah, I just completed my first best ball draft with Kyle. I kind of dove in head first with no research. I had never done one before. I was very unfamiliar with the format of the scoring. I feel like my team's pretty good. I kind of went with what John said. I loaded up with 6, 7 running backs and wide receivers. And I kind of went with, towards the end of the draft, I wasn't looking at what their ADPs were or kind of names per se. I was also looking at who could have a boom week and be able to fill in on buys and who could give me the best return on investment for a late round pick. And it's definitely something new for me. And it does give you a really good idea about where guys are going to go as we kind of, trickle into redraft season.
And of course, once you move along, you'll pick up the little niches that'll help you win more, just like DFS tournaments and double stacking, not just single stacking, but getting guys like a random one, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel with Teddy Bridgewater. Like you're trying to double stack to maximize your ceilings. And so you'll get more and more of that the more leagues you play. But it just you have to remember that just because we see all the important data and information being spat out like ADPs and we're trying to rank guys intelligently, you can take advantage of the $1 leagues right now. Like honestly, in a way, rather than playing the $35 FFPCs, I'm probably a donkey. Like I should be sprinkling that in 7 times 5 is 35, right? Yeah. I should be sprinkling it in 7 $5 leagues at like Bestball 10s or drafters because that gives me a higher payout. So I like to sprinkle both. I like to play both, especially slow drafts, which are 2, 6, or 8 hour clocks, depending what you play. So you kind of go about your day, you get a notification, you stop, you look at your roster, you look at who's available, and then you can just pick your entire draft like that. So you don't have to be available. There are just so many number of options, and the overall emphasis that is not only a way to invest during the off season, but it just keeps you informed and ahead of your league mates in these slow spring months.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, John, do you have a general philosophy heading into best ball drafts? Do you traditionally wait on quarterback? Do you traditionally go running back early and then kind of let the receivers come to you, just knowing there's more boom and bust there? Do you have an overall just kind of plan, or do you let the draft kind of come and see how it goes?
Sean Siegel, Curtis Patrick, Jack Miller, and the super guys smarter than me at RotoViz always do an off-season series. And so I've paid attention to it for a few years now. And one of the general strategies I always take away and use is quarterback win rates. So it's saying whether you take a 2 quarterback or 3 quarterback approach, you should draft in this range because that led to the highest win rates the year prior. And this year, I don't think it's paywall, so I don't think they mind me touting the product. It's fine. This year, it was either whether or not you go 2 quarterbacks to 3 quarterbacks, you should be drafting them in rounds 7 through 12 because it projects us with the highest win rate. So for your typical 10 and 12 man leagues, I just like to play it by the book. We're trying to get that extra steak dinner here and just go 2 or 3 quarterbacks, round 7 through 12. And every draft, like I said, you're just going to play it by ear. It's going to differ. I pretend like to have a strategy at the very end. Let's say the first round, I'll draft Travis Kelce always. And thus I only need 2 tight ends. I know, and I can wait until 18 rounds later to get that second tight end because how many times is someone, even George Kittle, going to outscore Travis Kelce every week? So I don't have to prioritize a backup tight end whatsoever. And thus my only job is grabbing a high upside touchdown guy whose bye week is not the same as Kelce's. So little things like that. But if you want to start dabbling beyond 10 or 12 man leagues and want to get into the tournament formats, and maybe there will be more tournaments coming up that people start jumping into, I think a more concerted approach is probably the best way to go because you have to, just like a DFS tournament, right? You're trying to factor in what everyone else is doing and thus doing something differently to zig when they zag. So even though I don't preach quarterback in the first 5 rounds, if you can start a draft at the very end of the first round and get like Kelce, Tyreek Hill, and then Mahomes slips in the 3rd round, and thus you have a Chiefs stack to start, I think that's a great concerted approach to take. One of many.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And I think this is a good jumping off point because I want to talk about your recent article over at Rotoworld where you kind of talked to some fantasy minds. You talked to some people that play a lot of high stakes, a lot of these best ball type leagues, and kind of got some ideas of players that they're fading. I guess in general, was there a name or two that you kept hearing that maybe surprised you or kind of like, I didn't really see that coming, but now that I'm kind of thinking about it, it makes a lot more sense? Once
Clyde EdwardsHelaire went in the first round of the actual NFL draft, I just assumed. I knew it. Everyone gets rookie fever. It's fine. And EdwardsHelaire, what's funny is that the comment I received the most from everyone. So to quickly review, it's posted on my Twitter page right now. It's my most recent piece on Rotoworld, and that was just taking a Bob McGinn approach to fantasy football and surveying the best guys, the most successful players year-round, who I'm friends with, who I respect, who I actually parse knowledge from, because I will fully admit that they are better players than me, and have a successful track record, getting them to rank their most overrated players 10 through 1 on a point scale. And the guy who came back with the most points was none other than EdwardsHelaire. And everyone, for the most part, commented they love the player, right? How can you not love Helaire? But it's just the fact that right now he's going in the mid-second round and sometimes even at the end of the first. And Damian Williams isn't a ghost. Like, Damian Williams is still there. Damian Williams still has an early down role. As Evan Silva always notes, he's one of the best wheel route runners in the entire league. And yes, Clyde EdwardsHelaire is a better receiving back than Damian Williams and will likely have that role all to himself, but he's not a 3-down back. And I don't think that's the plan, honestly, at least for this year, with Damian Williams still on the final year of his contract. So dynasty, that's why EdwardsHelaire is the number 1 overall pick, because he gets the next 5 years of his life with Patrick Mahomes. But also next year, he probably does take over that 3-down role. It's just not first round ADP this year.
Yeah. And that rookie fever, Brian, always grabs people. People get really excited. Obviously, all the mocks had a running back going to the Chiefs. And when it finally happened at the end of the round 1, people were, obviously fantasy people were doing backflips, and the want to get him on their team has just kept creeping him up. And as much as we both like him, Brian, I mean, we have to be on agreement on this, that at that price, it's just too aggressive for where he's going.
Yeah, no, there's absolutely no way that I'd be touching him at that price level. We talked about this with Damian Williams last year, going into redraft leagues, is that people were trying to get him in the second round, and he's also not a 3-down back. I think for the time being, Kansas City is going to have kind of a rotation going on there in the backfield, with them kind of splitting touches, especially getting the carries being split. It wouldn't have mattered who was selected by Kansas City. That particular rookie running back would have had this same kind of fever to them. I mean, DeAndre Swift, everyone assumed it was going to be him who was taken. I think he probably fits the mold as a 3-down back a little bit more than EdwardsHelaire. But I mean, I would much rather take a guy like Swift a little bit later, maybe in late second and the mid third, than take a chance on Clyde EdwardsHelaire in a first round with the that, just like John alluded to, Damian Williams is not disappearing anytime soon.
Yeah, and I think people are kind of penciling that in. I think that's leading to a lot of the excitement. And
I think there is sneaky ways to at least take advantage if you are going to reach. Let's say in an FFPC league, like we already mentioned, tight end premium scoring, you go at number 4 or 5 overall, you skip Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara, and you go Travis Kelce. And that might be a little confusing, but then you lock up tight end position, you come back in the mid-second with EdwardsHelaire, and then in the early third round, you get Patrick Mahomes in that spot. And that's a unique approach at stacking the Chiefs as well. But standalone value in the mid-second, I just can't imagine it doing it myself.
Yeah, no, I definitely couldn't. There was 2 names that showed up that I was kind of surprised by. I think the biggest one was Cortland Sutton. Mm-hmm. Brian, I know we both have been pretty optimistic, and I feel like, and maybe it's just a Twitter bubble, but I feel like the Sutton buzz, the Sutton excitement this year going into the season is definitely there. And maybe that's just these guys understand that, like with EdwardsHelaire, everyone's excited. Everyone thinks that what we saw last year is legit, and there was a lot of reasons why that is the case. But if we're pushing up his ADP once again, Brian, it might be time to kind of zig while everyone else zags.
Yeah, I mean, I still love Cortland Sutton. I really think that once we get a little bit closer into redraft, it'll kind of recorrect itself, and more people will start taking Jerry Jeudy, and there'll be some probably talk about KJ Hamler getting a little more looks at the shorter passes. I like Sutton the best out of the wide receiver core, so I will be monitoring that ADP a lot. I still think he's probably the best bet to lead the team in touchdowns, targets deep down the field. But again, I stay away from the guys that the public starts to kind of push up in ADP, very similar to gambling. Like if the public is betting really heavy early on a specific team, I tend to go the opposite direction. So they go hand in hand for me.
Sutton was one that broke my heart because I love him as a player, love watching him. But it's true. I mean, in Drew Lock's 5 starts, he brought the offense down. Sutton in Drew Lock's 5 starts averaged 7 yards per target, finished inside the top 34 at his position just once, and that was Lock's spiked week against the Chargers. So there is a lot of concern, especially given all the pieces surrounding him. I will say, though, if you want a positive note, the good news is Sutton is pretty much the only guy who has rapport with Drew Lock among all their pieces. Jerry Jeudy, an elite route runner who will likely make some noise in his rookie year. But I still wonder like how much he, Alberto, KJ Hamler can actually do in just a weird offseason where you're not even getting to meet with their quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
unless you're Tom Brady.
Unless you're Tom Brady sneaking out the Tampa High School. Yeah.
Or Hayden Hurst, who's driving from Florida, Atlanta. And that brings me to the other guy, though, Mike Evans. Mike Evans being on the list, I can see the reasoning. I can see the logic. I can see, there's all those other names. But it seems like Chris Godwin's getting a lot of hype when Evans is kind of not. And I'm trying to figure that out in my head in terms of, it seems like they're obviously incredibly talented receivers, but don't have a lot of experience with Brady. And then I'll add in the Gronkowski, add in OJ Howard, maybe Tyler Johnson. How do you kind of separate those two guys? And what were people saying specifically about Evans that maybe, makes more sense on why he was the one that kind of got singled out?
Specifically for him, it was because his style of play and higher ADOT than Chris Godwin's just doesn't mesh with Tom Brady's style of offense. As we know, Tom Brady fed Edelman from the slot, where Chris Godwin buoyed career and actually recorded career highs from the slot. I believe his slot rate was 63% last year under Bruce Arians, and we know what he did in that position. So I think he was just the odd man out. Evans was. Having said that, if you would like to have an edge, you can just forego drafting Godwin and draft Evans later because he is falling right now. Yeah. And Evans is, it's weird to say, but like we know Evans is the better player among the two. Evans is like an elite superstar. Like you don't start your career with 6 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons and just call that arbitrary. Like you respect full talent.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that and that makes a ton of sense. And Brian zagging Evans might be the play.
Yeah, I mean, going against what the public is believing here with Tom Brady, that he's lost some arm strength, he's not going to go down the field. I do think Evans could have another monster year, as teams are more likely going to be kind of playing the underneath stuff with Gronk at the seam, Godwin running out of the slot, running that Larry Fitzgerald role. I think we could see some big games out of Evans. And I don't know what John would say to this. Like, I think Evans would be a good value in best ball for a guy that could have those games where he's getting 6 for 160 and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, and we know Evans historically has been kind of a spiked week roller coaster guy. Like it wasn't his full season, but last year he pretty much put his foot down on 3 games in particular we can point out. So that would be nothing new, and that is good for best ball in particular because, like I said, we want those spiked weeks. If you're using, late second, third round draft capital on Evans, you'd like to see a higher number. So that's what you're kind of banking on. But again, if everyone's going one way with Godwin and just assuming that's correct, it's kind of like what we did incorrectly to a lesser extent with D.D. Westbrook last year, where we all went one way and we just forgot completely about DJ Shark in his second year, and the other one broke out. So it's kind of doing that, except with higher draft capital involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Assuming we all know everything is never a good process.
And ideally, if you're playing lower stakes recreationally, $1, $5 leagues or whatever, ideally you're playing enough as a recreational player that you're treating it like a stock portfolio and not just one season long league. So sometimes, most of the time, honestly, I'll break my own tiers and I'll go like, I think just today I drafted Ben Roethlisberger over like Carson Wentz and Matthew Stafford because I had Deontay Johnson and Juju. So it's like, this makes sense. I kind of have to take advantage of this stack. So if you're playing enough leagues, you're going to notice yourself going away from the blueprint, and that's totally fine. That means you're doing it correctly because you're checking your own priors.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes a lot of sense too, especially when you're playing, if you're spreading it out throughout the offseason, you're playing a league here, a league there, it can add up quickly. And so I think tracking who you're kind of targeting a lot, obviously you'll find guys that you really like, but pivoting off of, okay, if I'm continually going with Carson Wentz and there's another quarterback in that range that I like a lot or think could blow up in a big way, throw a couple shekels over there, throw a couple targets over there, and take them on a couple teams and see if you can't, kind of balance out your portfolio. And I think a stock portfolio is a great way with like these best ball options. I think that's a great example.
And pre-draft, I went heavy on a lot of guys I truly believed in, and I'm happy with the situation. Miles Sanders, still love that I went overweight. Kenny Golladay, Robert Woods, the list goes on. But at the same time, I was also overweight on Damian Williams and Darrell Henderson. So I'm kind of like chasing the next 3 months to make up for those names that I just went like over 40% on. That was a disaster.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to see kind of tracking these over the course of the offseason to see how your mind changes, how your thoughts about certain players. John, is there a player that you've really changed or, you find yourself gravitating towards a lot more than you thought you had maybe back in February or March?
Oh, the schedule release just screwed me on Daniel Jones. Really hard. I was overweight on Daniel Jones. I was drafting him as like the QB 8 to 10. Love his rushing upside. Love especially his volatility and best ball in particular. Like for all we know, he could just be NFC East Jameis Winston. You don't fumble 18 times and suddenly become a superstar player. But he did spike, 4 games with 28 fantasy points, and that matters in best ball in particular. So while I was going overweight on him, he not only came out with the same bye week as Josh Allen, which was terrible. Those are two of my favorites. And we're drafting pre-draft without knowing bye weeks, but also he has one of the toughest schedules in the first month of the season. And all of this talk about Judge leaning on Jason Garrett's offense, who, remember, was removed from play calling duty in 2013 because he was so bad at that job, is really, really worrisome for that offense. Not so much Saquon Barkley, because that means they lean on him more, and Barkley's a stud no matter what you do outside of having a high ankle sprain. But for Daniel Jones, I'm starting to worry a little bit because that essentially takes away 4 games from his ceiling.
Brian, you wouldn't know anything about Jason Garrett's bad play calling, would you?
I'm going to keep saying this, that Jason Garrett is going to be just like the most evil thing ever to happen to the Cowboys, and he's going to lead the Giants to one of the best offenses in football. So all this talk about him being a crappy coordinator and play caller is probably going to be the complete opposite with New York, and we're going to see Saquon Barkley have 60, 70 catches, lead the league in total yards, score 15 to 20 touchdowns, and it's just going to be the bane of all Cowboys fans' existence.
What's funny is that, like, he did have some strengths, honestly, in that locker room, but he was never once throughout his tenure in Dallas the best coach among the 2 head coaches in the arena at any point in time. Yeah. And that's what made the team go from 10 wins to perpetually 8 wins or out of the playoffs every single year. Like, he was just a poor mind overall, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. And
couldn't agree more.
How are we feeling about Mike McCarthy, though, John? Obviously they're making the switch there. I want to be excited. I want to go. Jason Garrett's out of the way now, but I also know Mike McCarthy's now there, and I don't know how to kind of combine those two in my head.
Mike McCarthy went to his barn for a couple of years, created the Mike McCarthy Project, and watching all of his mistakes and trying to correct them. And the offseason, maybe it's luck, I don't know, but the offseason actually does paint a picture that the man has changed. Even making little small corrections, like going out and getting the best special teams coach in the game, and then getting rid of Maher and adding Greg Zuerlein, and getting a backup quarterback. The Cowboys never prioritized backup quarterback. Even Tony Romo was an undrafted free agent that Parcells refused to let go, and they had to give a high contract. Like, imagine an undrafted free agent being your direct backup. And that was the case. They kind of just lucked into the situation. And so to get arguably the best backup in the league, like, those things matter for winning football teams. And my favorite McCarthy stat throughout the entire offseason, Bob Sturm of The Athletic, by the way, does amazing work on the Cowboys all year long. And he said that he broke it down on a chart a few months back, and it was from the time McCarthy coached, from the time Jason Garrett coached, Jason Garrett was last in the league in aggressiveness, so going forward on fourth down, whereas McCarthy was actually first in the league. And that stuff matters because now the team will suddenly go from playing to tie every game and setting up 51-yard field goals as opposed to 45-yard field goals, which matter, and they now go to try to win games. And I just think that's super important.
Feeling better about your squad now, Brian?
I was happy the second they let him go. Now, I wanted to ask John here, with the Cowboys taking CeeDee Lamb, what is your thought on Michael Gallup? I know people, like, I was really high on him prior to the draft. I'm still pretty disappointed that they took CeeDee Lamb and didn't address some other needs on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, he's a baller, but, you know, I think there was other areas. But how does his addition affect Gallup's production in that offense?
I think Gallup is still here to stay for at least one more year, honestly. Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb are interchangeable from the slot. CeeDee Lamb, as we know, led the nation in yards per route run from the slot, and Cooper has been a much better receiver historically per Pro Football Focus's yards per route run number, which we know predicates success for fantasy and on the field in his career. So I think they're interchangeable, but at the same time, Gallup just doesn't go away. Like, Gallup has been a very successful player with over 1,900 yards receiving in his first 2 seasons in the league and has rapport with Dak Prescott. So, for instance, Ian Harditz and I at Rotoworld, we were invited to a dynasty startup league with Curtis Patrick and a bunch of guys at RotoViz, plus a number of people, Rich Rebar, JJ Zachariason, Scott Barrett, yada, 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 around the industry. And right now, I actually consider Gallup a steal because he's someone who is a proven producer, and yet his value is at its lowest point because people are concerned. Like, you have to remember, Amari Cooper's guaranteed money is gone in a couple of years. So what happens with Gallup? I know they're not going to pay him another $100 million deal and have 2 $100 million receivers in the same field. There is a chance that Gallup is the one that survives this on a reduced cost, and Cooper's the one that's gone in a couple of years. So I just think playing that edge right now, maybe it's not the case. Maybe that doesn't happen, but there's an edge to playing it like that. And so I still love Gallup for this year, honestly.
Yeah, no, and I think he's actually going to be a guy that's going to be a value because people are going to go, oh, Cooper's there. Oh, they drafted CeeDee Lamb. Who cares about Michael Gallup? But having that, consistency, having that, relationship already, knowing, okay, if I throw the ball here, Gallup's going to be in position. He's going to know the route to run. He's going to be where he needs to be, and he's going to, and Dak's just going to feel better. And he's going to be a guy that especially even in Bestball, where he's going to have those spike weeks. I'm going to be all over Michael Gallup, and I think Brian, as let's talk some of our targets. I think he's going to lead my list of receivers, or even just targets in general, of guys that could be tremendous values.
Yeah, I mean, I took him in the Bestball draft that we did in pretty late in the draft, and I was pretty ecstatic to be able to get him because I do feel that he is still kind of the guy that's like the downfield jump ball receiver in this offense that I think is going to take another step forward and going more down the field with the passing game and less quick passes. There's a lot of guys towards the back end of drafts. I like Bryn Edwards with the Raiders. Everyone's talking about Henry Ruggs, but I like Edwards to play on the outside and be kind of that traditional number 1 guy. He's another guy that I like. Who's a guy that you're looking at, John, late in drafts, best balls, that you think could make a huge impact? Strictly
for the draft capital and his role, what didn't change, I've been taking a lot of Allen Lazard in the later rounds. It's funny because, like, I understand you should probably be concerned, but his ADP didn't budge despite the team only adding Devin Funchess on a 1-year deal. Like, they literally didn't invest in that position whatsoever. And Lazard, who proved to be one of their most successful receiver, their second most successful receiver behind Davante Adams last year, walks into the same role this year. So I'm just really confused why his ADP hasn't budged whatsoever. So he's someone I've been stacking later rounds.
No, I think that's a great call. And anytime you can get a guy who has a big play potential, who's catching balls from Aaron Rodgers in late rounds, I think that's an absolute steal. I'm really finding myself gravitating towards Robert Woods a lot. Last year, he was incredible. It just the touchdowns were not there. And for a guy that is normally obviously he's not going to be a monster touchdown scorer, but 5, 6, 7, like that's definitely in his range of outcomes. If with Brandon Cooks out of the way, it's going to be him. It's going to be Cooper Kupp, the tight ends. I think Robert Woods is prime for a big season, and he's going about 50th overall right now around the aforementioned Cortland Sutton, around DK Metcalf, around DJ Chark. And I think I'm taking Robert Woods every time.
Let's take a deep breath because I have quite a few notes on Robert Woods, who is a plant my flag guy for me this year, because we know that target share and air yards are driving factors for positive regression, no matter the results. That's what we're trying to find here is opportunity. And Cooper Kupp led Robert Woods 10 touchdowns to 2 last year, but it was actually Woods who led the entire team in air yards and target share, 23%. From Jared Goff. And we can safely assume this year, after trading Brandon Cooks, they'll lean on more 12 personnel with Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett. And again, it's Kupp who's averaged 1.6 and 1.3 yards per route run from the boundary the past 2 years. And as Josh Norris noted on one of the most recent Rotoworld football podcasts, struggled even at Eastern Washington on the boundary against outside corners. That's just not his game. And so the fact that now with more dual tight end sets, we're going to have Woods and Kupp, one on the other on each sideline, it arguably makes Woods the best Rams receiver on the field at all times as well. So not only for the positive regression, but just for the performance on the field, I absolutely love Woods this year.
Yeah. Target the volumes, and I mean that's. Brian, I'm going to go draft another share right now.
I'm going to hope that the touchdowns don't start coming until later in the year again, so that way I can hit on another big parlay for guys to score touchdowns for the first time.
I shouldn't say this because I'm give away my secrets, but right now in particular, I'll give you a little cheat code. On drafters in particular, if you go there, Robert Woods is one of those guys who, like, his ADP is buried at the bottom, kind of like Alan Lazard, kind of like Matt Breida, where you have to dig for them, and it doesn't seem like you're drafting him correctly because he's like jumbled into the middling tiers. But like now, he's a guy that everyone forgets about because he is behind someone like I love Deebo Samuel, but he's behind Deebo Samuel. And like, let's say Tyler Lockett. Love Tyler Lockett, but he's behind Tyler Lockett, and he shouldn't be. And so you can just kind of like scroll down just a hair, and you see Robert Woods there. You're like, oh, like that's my next guy. So if everyone wants to go jump on that in the next couple of weeks, like it's a great opportunity.
Take advantage right now because that's when the market is the softest for sure. Brian, what are any other names in kind of those mid rounds that you're looking at? Anybody that you wish you had pulled the trigger on earlier, and now you're going to go back and next time you're drafting, be more optimistic about drafting them?
Well, I know one guy that I'm looking at who's still going pretty late, and I did this last year, and hopefully it doesn't bite me in the ass again, and that's Mike Williams with the Chargers. Like, I just don't understand how his value is still so low. And like John's saying, like, we're looking at air yards per target, and he by far the leader on the Chargers by like a good, 3-4 yards at least. And he almost had 1,000 yards last season on only 48 catches, or like less than 50 catches. And it's just the touchdowns that are keeping his value down in drafts. And he's a guy who should see, even with a more conservative offense, I think we're going to see positive regression in the touchdown area. I
mean, he literally turned just one of his 12 end zone targets into a touchdown. That's insanely. It's not bad. It's just efficient, right? So I would imagine he bounces back from that. Not to mention finished 8th overall in air yards in the league, but 38th at his position. That also is crazy. Even an upgrade to like wide receiver 25 or 26 would be tremendous at his current value. And with Phillip Rivers gone, it's not out the question that Keenan Allen monopoly's over. Like Keenan Allen is the better receiver, but what if range of outcomes without Rivers, Keenan Allen isn't the number one receiver, and no one seems to be asking that.
Yeah, and figuring out the Chargers, I think, is one of my biggest.
It's tough
off-season, because
Tyrod.
Is it Tyrod all season? Is it a combination? Do we go to Justin Herbert early? Is it time for Keenan Allen to pass the torch a little bit more? How much does Hunter Henry get involved? Is Austin Eckler going to see 90 to 100 targets? Like trying to figure out where this team is at. Like I'm with you, Brian. I love Mike Williams. Obviously. Even if the numbers come down a little bit, the touchdown numbers will come back to the mean, and those numbers will be there, and he'll still have a really solid season. But to try and wrap my head around this team, I can't get there.
Yeah, there's another guy on the Chargers who is also really good value. I noticed in our best ball draft that we did is Justin Jackson. People seem to be passing him up in favor of John Kelly. And I think that's a mistake, as Jackson is he's been there as the backup. He is more of that like downhill runner kind of guy, and I think they're going to be leaning on him to get those early down yards. And we're going to see Eckler kind of maintain that role as that scat back and that quick hitter out of the backfield. And I think early on, especially, he could take over the role as the runner in an offense that should be pretty run heavy.
I think my only concern with Jackson is that, at least as the season goes along, he has to stay healthy to fend off Joshua Kelly, who's a runner of a similar profile. But remember that Jackson did average 8 touches. It doesn't seem like much. That's still 8 touches, essentially going like in the 15th round on, while Melvin Gordon held out last year. So Jackson walks in with the role, and that's not really something you can say about like Giovanni Bernard or Ryquell Armstead or guys like that who you're drafting in that range, because they don't have role. You're drafting them for their handcuff opportunity. But Jackson at least does have carries in his range of outcomes in week 1.
Yeah, and if this offense clicks and Tyrod's the guy for 16 games and they're more efficient than we expect, I think he's going to be a value. And Brian, to your point, I got him at pick 227. His ADP is 180, so I felt really good about that in our draft. But I mean, I just kept overlooking him. Eventually I got to a point where, okay, he is so much better than anything else that's on the board that I had to dive in on it at that point. And I'm with you. I think he's going to be a guy that could make a lot of sense. John, another backfield that everybody seems to be kind of going one way is Detroit, and everyone's all over DeAndre Swift and no one's paying attention to Kerryon Johnson. Like, we're talking range of outcomes. We're talking about Matt Patricia, who wants to, use a couple different running backs. I think Kerryon Johnson's a guy that if you're looking for running backs who could pop, I think he makes a lot of sense.
He does, but my concern is that historically Patricia has used not 3 but 4 running backs, and so I would imagine that's why I'm down on Swift, not as a player. I think he's a tremendous talent. Same with Kerryon. I think he's a uber elite talent. But to me, it doesn't matter because it just seems like he's going to open the year with 4 running backs again. And again, we have to go back to the fact that Kerryon has missed 14 of 32 games since coming into the league, which is a major issue. And when he's gone, that unlocks DeAndre Swift's ceiling. But for the time being, knowing that DeAndre Swift's strengths are his pass catching ability, as Brian noted at the beginning of the show, whether it was CEH, Swift, Taylor, whoever landed with the Chiefs was in a good opportunity. However, if it was Swift, the fact that he averaged 9.1 yards per catch in Georgia, the fact that Georgia moved him around the entire formation, even out wide at times, it would have been just a rocket ship, just like CEH. And so we know he's going to play that role over Kerryon. And that's why it's just really hard for me to take much Kerryon Johnson, despite the fact, yes, his ceiling is high if he stays healthy.
All right. As we get ready to wrap up, as we get ready to come towards the end of the show, John, is there one guy that is just your guy for this year? A guy you're pounding the table for, a guy that, whether it's best ball, whether it's redraft, you're going to end up with a ton of, and you're just going to be all over.
How about this? How about I give you one that is my guy But then I give you another one that's my guy that's probably going to hurt me. How about that?
I love it.
Okay. My guy that I'll be pounding the table for is Calvin Ridley this year. And quickly, reminder that Mohamed Sanu, when he was traded in week 8, from that time to the time Calvin Ridley suffered that season core injury in week 14, Ridley actually led the team and Julio Jones in targets, 49-47, and air yards in the 6 games he played. So there's that. Small sample size, but Calvin Ridley, in the 3 games Austin Hooper, who is now obviously with the Browns, missed last year, Ridley recorded 8 catches for 143 yards and a touchdown, 6 catches for 85 yards and a touchdown, and 8 catches for 90 yards. So there's that as well. The first thing I ever published on Rotoworld actually was the available targets and air yards tracker. It's available. It's right there. And I keep it updated every night throughout the offseason. And it essentially tells us how many targets, air yards, and targets inside the 10-yard line are missing from last season's production, thus available for the new faces and everyone on the team this upcoming year. And the Falcons are not only have a league high 258 targets available missing from last season's production, but also no other team in the league has even 200. So it's far and away the most opportunity available in Atlanta. So I think that knowing, apologies if there's any Falcons fans listening, but knowing they didn't improve their defense whatsoever, like they're going to be awful, they have to put their foot on the gas. So not only is Julio a winner, but Ridley is the biggest winner, and Matt Ryan is also a winner.
And Hayden Hurst is a winner, right, Brian?
And Hayden Hurst as well. Yes, tell him.
Hayden Hurst is my guy, is my flag guy. He's stepping into an Austin Hooper role where we saw Austin Hooper, kind of a no-name guy, turn into the 6 to 9 targets every single week and be in the top 10 at the position in fantasy pretty much on a weekly basis. And Hayden Hurst was the guy that they took ahead of Mark Andrews. And you know, in Baltimore, so he's stepping into a role, just like John said, that they're missing the 250 plus targets, and who else is going to take those in other than Ridley, Hayden Hurst? And he's going in like the 15th to 18th tight end range. Like that is a tremendous value for a guy who could be top 10, top 5 at the position. And
I'll give you one more that you can steal from me on Hayden Hurst, and that is in the 3 games Hooper missed last year, Jaden Graham actually ran the 7th most routes among all tight ends. And that doesn't tell us that Jaden Graham is going to be Hooper's fill-in this year. It just tells us they want to feature one tight end and will use that one tight end. And that one tight end is Hayden Hurst.
Yep. I think there's going to be a lot to like about that Falcons offense. Obviously, Ridley and Julio, Hayden Hurst. My question is, what kind of passing down volume could we see out of Gurley? Because obviously, you know, the Rams pulled in the reins a little bit, but the Falcons brought him in. They like him. They seemingly want to make him a big part of their offense. I know there's some buzz growing about his potential this season, but as in terms of just as a passing down guy, do we think he gets any sort of volume there?
I would imagine, like last year, Devontae Freeman averaged 4.6 targets per game, whereas Gurley with the Rams not only averaged just 3.1, so literally a target and a half fewer per game, but also the Rams finished with a league low rate and percentage of targets to their running backs. They just switched the offense up altogether as they attempted to try new things, and that's what got Higbee involved in that last month of the season. So I think it probably won't be competitive with the top of the league, but it will be more than the Rams offered him. We have to listen more, keep our ears to the ground to see what comes out of Dirk Cutter's mouth as we move along here, because the most recent note we have is that they weren't sure about his health and he'll be on a snap count. But I don't know what that means. I have no idea. And they didn't even talk about like what his touches would be on that snap count. So if it's similar to last year where he would play at first, you know, the Rams snap count was 60+% of the snaps, which was middling, but they would still give him 20 touches a game. So it's a high touch rate, not a snap rate. I'm totally fine with that. And honestly, he's one of the offseason's biggest winners. Like it's certainly a risk to take him right now, but he's a top 15 running back based on opportunity alone.
Yeah, and that's what you're looking for, especially if we expect this offense to be up-tempo, to be in the red zone a lot, to have plenty of touchdown.
To be forced to throw because their defense is so bad.
Yeah. I think that's a great call, and I think if you want to stack a team in best ball, I think the Falcons could make sense, even if you avoid Julio and get some combination of Matt Ryan, Todd Gurley, Calvin Ridley, maybe even Hayden Hurst, like some combination of that. I think you're going to be loving where your team is, as the season rolls along.
Totally agree. And if you look at my rosters, it's like that. So I hope so.
Brian,
should I quickly, before we get out of here, hit on the second guy I mentioned?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this guy, his ADP hasn't changed. And I think it's because, like Leonard Fournette last year, people were just so hurt at the year prior. But I will fully admit to you, Chris Herndon was an absolute disaster last year. 4-game suspension to starts, lingering soft tissue injury with numerous setbacks throughout the season and practice, and then suffered a season-ending rib injury only 18 snaps into his 2019 debut. Just a mess. But we know rookie tight ends historically struggle because they are essentially two positions. They have to learn offensive lineman and receiver in a much bigger and slower body. So it's already tough out the gates. However, Herndon spiked 39 catches, 502 yards, and 4 touchdowns as a rookie. And 380, and 4 touchdowns came from Sam Darnold in particular, and at the 13 starts he made as a rookie as well. So they had the rapport. And then you look at what Ryan Griffin did, and Ryan Griffin's not better than Chris Herndon. They don't have more invested in Ryan Griffin than Chris Herndon. But you look at what Ryan Griffin did in Herndon's place in 9 starts last year before he got injured, and Ryan Griffin was actually the overall tight end 7 in those 9 starts he played with Sam Darnold once he came back for mono. So I love Adam Gase featuring the tight end. I love Chris Herndon's rapport with Sam Darnold. And he's still going literally as like a tight end 20 and beyond in best ball. And it's crazy because I'll go ahead and say it. Like, he's this year's Darren Waller. He's the guy you sneak in who is an obvious tight end 1. And it's crazy to me his ADP hasn't budged.
Yeah, and I think that's like last year was frustrating because I wanted to get on the Herndon hype train a couple times. I wanted to be excited about him. He obviously has the athleticism to be an impact. They have Jamison Crowder, and they brought in Brashad Perriman, but like nobody that's going to be a huge target monster on the outside. I think there is a big opportunity if they can stay healthy, if they can protect Darnold, for him to be a legit factor. And I think that's a great call. Like, I would not be shocked, Brian, if we're talking in week 3, week 4, everybody go pick up Chris Herndon because he's 30% owned and he's had 3 straight weeks of 7+ targets. And he's been, incredibly viable for fantasy.
Well, that'll be us telling everybody else as we have inside information that he'll be on our rosters, just not everyone else's rosters.
He'll already be there for sure.
But yeah, my only concern with the Jets offense is Sam Darnold. I love his skill set and all that stuff, but it's just, it's been 2 years now, and he hasn't really taken that step. Like we saw Josh Allen get improved last year in his second year, and I want to see Sam Darnold come out of the gates and show why the Jets took him really early. That'd be my only issue with the Jets pass catchers.
He's kind of been like the Robbie Anderson version at quarterback. Like, he's had 4-game stretch and that's it for his entire career.
Yeah.
But plus, I love, like, when he works off the cuff, it's so much fun to watch. So like, I really do have my fingers crossed he's special.
Yeah.
He's kind of like Tony Romo in a way.
Yep. A little bit. Yeah, you're right.
A guy, speaking of quarterbacks that I'm going to be targeting in a lot of leagues, is Matthew Stafford. Obviously, that offense, we talked about kind of some of the frustrations with the running back, but having all those weapons, plus TJ Hawkinson, plus Kenny Galladay, just all these weapons all over the field. He was on pace for 5,000 yards and like 40 touchdowns last season. Obviously, the back injury is worrisome, but if you're drafting him, you're probably either drafted one other really good quarterback and you can roll with those 2 guys most of the year, or better case is you take him plus like 2 other quarterbacks that can be serviceable, and you really hope you hit that upside, you hit that ceiling, because obviously if the ceiling hits, it's close to 5,000 yards, it's 35, 40 touchdowns. But if his back acts up, and then you're rolling with whoever else you happen to have on your roster at that point.
I might be showing my age here, but remember when Bill Simmons wrote good columns and he used to mention Matthew? He used to call him Matthew if he's healthy Stafford. Like that would always be his moniker. But then Matthew Stafford went and rattled off 8 consecutive seasons with 16 games in a row. So the back injury, like, is it worrisome? Sure. But he's not injury prone at all. Like players are only injury prone until they're not. And Stafford has proven now to be like a dog in the fight every single year. So I'm not concerned about it. And as you said, not only paced for 5,000 yards in those 8 starts, but also averaged over 20 fantasy points per game, 20.8 in 8 starts, which is crazy in his first year under Darrell Bevell. And remember, Stafford missed the playbook. Like Stafford wasn't even paying attention to the offense because his wife Kelly had that brain surgery. So he wasn't even focused on OTAs at the time. Whereas this year, he has a full offseason in his second year for a team that returned its entire receiving core from last year. So there's no reason to be worried about rapport with the Lions offense in a weird offseason whatsoever. And so you have to love Stafford. I'm kind of upset at myself, actually, because pre-draft, I was drafting him high, assuming everyone will catch on. Like I was drafting him as quarterback 9 or 10. And yet, to this day, he's still not going as quarterback 9 or 10, even though I really believe he should.
Yeah.
So it's a value for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Like his top, he has top 5 potential, and he's going outside the top 10, 12. Like he is. If you're waiting at quarterback, if you don't want to dive in too early, he is the perfect target. Tons of upside without the price tag.
Yeah, and he fits on the kind of team, just like we were talking with the Falcons. The Lions lost their Slay on the outside, so their defense is just going to be worse than it was last year. So they're going to be playing from behind a lot again, and that's just a boost to a quarterback on a team that is going to be slinging the ball all over the field with a good rapport with his receivers that he's already had with over the last year.
Absolutely. And a second year TJ Hawkins. And I'm excited about that Lions offense. I think it could actually be fun.
Yeah, because their biggest addition, like I said, not a receiver, but was a receiving back. And so just to get an explosive young player, like it could be like wheels up for the Lions offense for sure.
Yeah,
and he's a huge upgrade over J.D. McKissick.
I love to see them get creative and play Carry On and Swift at the same time. Line Swift off at different spots. You use some unique formations because I think there's a lot you could do with that whole roster. But we're relying on Matt Patricia, so we'll see if we end up getting there.
That's true too. Which, by the way, that's why I also love Swift and Dynasty. I mean, Swift is kind of everyone's 3 or 4 with Dobbins and Akers, like depending on how you shake them out, but. Factor in the fact that Swift might get fired after this year if he can't prove to be competitive in the NFC North with top-end talent, because that's what they are. Like, it seems like they really only focus on their 22 starters, and they don't worry about the rest of their roster, which is a disaster. But if they can't be competitive this year, then maybe Patricia goes, and then maybe Swift is in a competition for the starting running back role as a workhorse. So you have to love Swift and Dynasty as well. Yeah,
I think all 3, like Swift – Dobbins and Jonathan Taylor, are all the starter next year. I think that the situation sets up nicely for them all to gain that role, whether it's because Mark Ingram's on his way out. Do you think Jonathan Taylor is the guy that starting this tier, or do you think Marlon Mack is kind of Damian Williams, where he'll be more involved than people want to give him credit for?
Just like with Damian Williams, it's really weird since Marlon Mack is on the final year of his contract before he becomes not even restricted, but an unrestricted free agency, and the team inevitably doesn't re-sign him. Having said that, it seems like one of those situations, just like with Clyde EdwardsHelaire, that we can pencil in Mack and Williams to get a handful of carries in weeks like 1 through 8, and maybe guys in your season-long league don't have like the courage or the roster space to hold on to Taylor and whatnot. But then over the back half of the league, like they just exploded, and then we're talking about them as first round options next year. Yep.
League winners. I think that makes a lot of sense.
It's like what happened with Nick Chubb, right? Like for a month, he was behind Duke Johnson, was it?
No, it was Carlos Hyde and Duke
Carlos
Johnson.
Hyde, that's it, yes. And then they traded Carlos Hyde, and Nick Chubb got all the carries. But in all high-stakes leagues, everyone held on to Nick Chubb. Everyone knew he was coming. It was just a matter of time. And I feel like that's what not so much EdwardsHelaire because he'll have a pass catching role immediately, but Jonathan Taylor for sure, since that's his weakest part of his game. And random, but McCole Hardman is also like for the first 4 weeks, you may not see him, but he's coming. He's coming very soon.
Yeah. I think he's a guy that is going to be a nice value. But yeah, the Sammy Watkins, I don't think that experience is long for much. No. John, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for taking the time coming to hang out with us. We will definitely have to do this again as the offseason rolls along. I
totally agree. I enjoy just sitting around talking football and not watching The Office over and over again. So tremendous.
All right. For John Daigle, for Brian Twining, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Peace.